All right, so this is
Final segment,
yeah, no, this is number 4, episode 4, or episode 4,
part 4.
What's that?
Well,
Episode 4, part 4. I don't know how we've been labeling episodes.
yeah, something like that.
All right.
I don't know. My brain was bouncing in a couple of different directions, and it's really easy to get caught up on the negative, and it's really easy to capitalize on it too. And I was mentioning to my wife, for example, that when I did have my Twitter account, which I had for about 10 years, and I was proud of it, and I'm like, oh, my Twitter account. The points where it would jump the highest in follower count was when I started retweeting stuff about whatever the latest school shooting was. Just as an example of people capitalizing on crap. But so yeah, try and get away from that stuff. It's really easy to take advantage of it, but
So I guess what you're doing is you're kind of continuing from the previous conversation.
yeah, I guess I am.
Okay,
Yes,
so yeah,
I was trying to get away from it, and
in
then
our
it
previous
snuck
segment, we were
back.
talking
Yeah.
about like
Yeah, it
how.
snuck back.
So yeah, we kind of wrapped that up. So, anyways, yeah, I don't know if we really have a specific topic. Maybe we'll just shoot by the hip here, but we just kind of wanted to wrap this. We were just talking about before we started the camera here about South by Southwest. And how I didn't even know that it was going on. Here I'm living in Austin, and it's this huge event, that happens every year. And it looks like, from what I could pull up, the attendance has been dwindling, since COVID. I had seen some posts on social media that was showing like 6th Street dead, but I don't know how accurate that is. It's just some joker could put that out in there and said, hey, no one's showing up. But who knows what the context was of what it really means. But my point being is, this is kind of like the Super Bowl situation where I'm like, am I just like not part of what's going on anymore? Like, because then later I read that, it was one of the most watched Super Bowls in history. But I'm like, where am I? Like, it's the world becomes so incredibly geared towards the individual that it's literally, you're capable of tuning out anything that you're not interested in, and everything gets funneled into what you like. It's like literally the algorithm of like a social media page is happening in your real world. Like how could I not have heard of it? Like, who's going? Is the attendance low? Like, what?
Well, it's this weird duality of like everybody seeing the same thing at once and not. Like, I've had people that I knew from Facebook, for example, but I had never met in person, that I would be at concerts like 2 or 3 times in a row where they'd be at the same concert and I wouldn't actually meet them yet. And then finally I've met some of those people, but it's that weird juxtaposition of everybody's there and not, if that makes any sense.
I'm not sure how that correlates.
I don't know how maybe I drifted a little too far.
So I think, basically, my point being is that we've been able to, in the modern society, create a reality not only online, but that extends into the real world, where we can, and somehow, and I don't know how to put this together, but my sphere of influence, and probably because I think it has a lot to do with a lot of people working from home these days, not having to be at work. I'm not in school. I guess it's mainly probably just the fact that I'm not engaged in social situations outside of ones I choose to be in. That's probably what's happening here. It's probably me being in situations that I choose to be in and not ones that I am forced to be in. And if I was forced to be in certain things, I'd probably be getting more experiences of outside and alternative modes of thinking and what these people are doing, as opposed to gathering with groups that I already have a common interest in, like you did. Like, you guys are online, you're being friends. Hey, yeah, it makes sense you'll be at the same concert. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's not like, you weren't forced to go there, you chose to go there, and you chose to go to a place that these people who have similar interests and like-minded went to as well. So maybe that's part of what you were trying to get to. But yeah, so even in the external world, his internal world creeped into his external world, because he only engaged in the cyber world with people that he would eventually meet in the external world. So yeah, external and internal, these cyber worlds and external worlds are combining and coalescing into where people are only doing things that are corrugated to the like-mindedness of others, and we're not being forced to coexist anymore in any way.
I was just thinking, like, when I pick my son up from school, and all the parents are standing around together, but instead of having the conversations we could be having, which sometimes do happen. I'm not dismissing, and sometimes they do, and that's great when they do. But at least half the time, we're all on our phones in our own little worlds. When this would be the perfect opportunity to hey, this is somebody that, hey, we're both parents, their kids are in the same class, whatever. We could talk about almost anything, but we could do it in real meat space for a change,
Right,
and it's not happening.
I think that's why these realities that we're existing in are so polar opposites. And I'm not saying, and I think it's to the detriment of one that is filled with lies and misinformation. And that's not to exclude the fact that it can happen on either end of the spectrum, which it certainly can. Like I'm saying, like admittedly in my sphere of influence, whether it be online or outside in the real world, is very limited to what I choose. So, forced upon engagement with others, I think maybe kept us at somewhere in a middle ground of reality, to where when, they took away the fairness doctrine in media back in that, when was it? 80s,
yeah,
that, stations like Fox News were allowed to completely lie. So you have an entire segment of the population who have been fed lies and bullshit, and that's all they get all the time. And they're not engaging with people that are grounded in reality, that, some sense of agreed upon, morality, and agreed upon, standards of critical thinking, because, and then everything just kind of got so divided in that regard.
And then you fast forward to COVID, where, people working remotely much more heavily and doing other things remotely, so that you're not forced to engage with people that have differing opinions.
Right, and like you said, now when I used to go to the gym when I was younger, they'd be having conversations, and sometimes it'd get heated, it'd be political, but people are talking, so that these things were discussed in the open. And I'm not, but today it would literally probably end up in a fist fight. So it's that polar opposite. But you could have a discussion.
Or if you do go to the gym, 3/4 of the people have some form of earbuds.
Today.
I'm
talking about, this is 30 years, when I was a kid.
Right.
People
right.
talked. We talked to each other.
Yeah.
Now nobody talks to each other. You go to the gym, no one's talking to each other. It doesn't, I just go to the gym here.
There might be a few people here and there, but generally speaking, 80-90% of people don't even look at each other.
Right, in spaces, public spaces that used to be, communal spaces where people talked, you generally don't see conversation. You don't see people just strike up conversations in the streets. You don't see people strike up a conversation at the bar with a stranger, like I used to. When I was younger, that was pretty common practice to just strike up a conversation with somebody sitting on a bench. I don't see that happening today like it used to. And if you do, people look at you strange. So, occasionally I will, and I'm just trying to be nice, and people I think really find it odd. And all I'm doing is being cordial. Like, hey, I like your shirt, or like, hey, that's a cool pair of shoes you got there. Or like, hey, what's up with that? And even, people I'm with sometimes look at me like I'm weird. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to be a human being. I'm out here engaging with humanity, and this is normal. What I'm doing is normal.
Right.
What you guys are doing is fucked up, man. Like, you're completely separating yourselves in society.
Somebody wears a band shirt. Hey, that was a nice album they just had, or whatever. Yeah.
How was that? I was there. And sometimes people appreciate it. They're like, hey, man, yeah, they'll talk to you, man. They love it, because they're like, hey, shit, man, somebody's fucking acknowledging me as a human being. So, yeah, let's do more of that. You see something you like, tell them you like it. Hey, your hair looks cool, dude. Or you don't have hair, that looks cool, dude. Whatever the case, because we've lost touch. we've lost touch with each other. And I think, unfortunately, yes. Is there a bias or of me saying that one side is completely flooded with lies? Maybe. I don't think so. I think it's just a lot of it's just complete and utter lies spread by very deceitful, hateful people, and they've been wrapped up in this world, and they have nobody to talk to pull them away. And now they're so far gone that their brain has been completely wiped out, and they can't even understand a word that the other side is saying. It's just gotten that divided at this point. At this juncture.
Which I don't know if we should end maybe. Anyways, possible final point, or maybe you add one afterwards. You saw the video where apparently the point at which we started to get more and more divided again was the year I was born, 1973.
Yeah, well, that was after the Civil Rights Act. So,
well, yeah. But,
so then that's what really kind of...
But how we started to kind of come together up until that point, and then we kind of...
Well, I'm not saying... I don't think it was so much that we were coming together as that there was transitions being made forcefully on people. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't the coming together so much as the forcing of people to do things that were right that divided people. Because what it did then was it made people that were okay with getting social services and social programs and the expansion of, and taxing the rich and all these things that benefited the middle class and made for a more equitable society as far as economics is concerned. When the division was then when the dividing factors of society were trying to be brought together in terms of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion. That's when they backlash and said, you know what, I'd rather be broke than woke. I'd rather have my hate and my disdain for these others than I will for my own economic security. And as the decades progressed, they became more and more brainwashed, because you can show them all the evidence that shows that every single policy that any Republican has ever made has tanked the economy, that every Republican administration has tanked the economy, and they will find a way to weasel and twist their way out of it and find a way not to acknowledge the fact that they're racist, bigoted, misogynistic. And that's the reality behind all of this, because there is no other justification that you can come to terms with. But once again, we've had this talk where when you bring it out, their internalized hate for themselves and their own shame and guilt gets projected back onto the world, and they don't want to acknowledge it. And some are just straight up bigoted and racist, and they don't give a fuck. Yeah, that's right. I don't like women. Yeah, I'm fucking superior. But then you have a good segment who think they're good people, but they're sick and twisted in their brains. Because that's the only explanation for any of this, that anybody would be able to use such cognitive dissonance and logical fallacies and denials and willful ignorance to justify, voting for a convicted felon who's been, adjudicated for sexual assault, dozens of charges.
Well, he's a con man with over 6 bankruptcies who
4 of them were casinos, which are basically money machines, and 4,000 litigations. You can look it up. There's like over 4,000 something piece, whether it's for, fraud or some kind of business related incidences for the good portion of these.
Or assault or any number of different things. Yeah.
Defamation, whatever the hell. And then he's got 34 convictions. So, you voted for a sexual assaulting, he said the most vile things. There was just 2 days of hate in New York prior to the election. That's just undeniable hatred. And then you can't justify it. There's no logical justification. I understand when people say, I want to think critically, and I don't want the government to tell me how to think or what to do. But to think, to be critical, they say, I want to be critical. I want to question.
And then they vote for somebody who isn't.
Well, not only that, but they don't understand. Look, that is a good thing. Be critical. Think about what you're being told. But you have to know how to.
Right.
You can't be critical without the expertise of critical thinking skills, of discernment, which they obviously lack. And they'll even say things like, oh, we just want to make students that are, what was the thing I heard just yesterday from Trump? We want to make students that just simply are going to be good for business, that are going to be the good workers of tomorrow.
Right.
And that's how, you know, public school systems got started to begin with. They just wanted you to be a cog in the wheel of the capitalist system. They don't teach you to think critically. They don't teach you to, you know, yeah, question, but only question things that, you know, make you feel bad about yourself. You know, it's twisted. So you have to have discernment, you have to have critical thinking skills, and you have to have knowledge and understanding to think critically, which is absolutely and totally lacking. And the emotional intelligence to provide the wisdom to see the biggest picture, to see the bigger picture, which is absolutely lacking. So if anything should be taught in school, look, you can look up anything. You can look up anything you want in this day and age. Yes, it's important to have some knowledge. What's more important is emotional intelligence and critical thinking skills. That's what should be taught. How do you problem solve? How do you work with others? How do you cooperate? How do you emotionally regulate? That's the most important thing about being a human being. But they don't want any of that, because if people had that, this whole system would be dismantled. So maybe we can end it with that.
Yep, that sounds like a good spot.
All right, so yeah, you know, in this segment we talked about being, you know, talking to others, being in communities, and yeah, unfortunately, you know, you're probably only going to be able to do that with like-minded people, and hopefully you'll find them out there. If you come across somebody who is Trump and they seem like they're trying to better themselves, maybe give it a shot. See what happens. Give it about 5 minutes. You probably learn that it was a waste of time. If it's not,
But if it goes any better than that,
goes any
great,
better than
you
that,
know.
keep engaging.
Yeah.
Keep chipping away. Most likely, the vast majority of the time, you're just going to be like, I can't, this person is lost, and you'll have to walk away. And unfortunately, we're in that reality. And at some point, we're probably going to have this discussion of what do we do? Because I think there has to be a multi-pronged approach. What that entails, yeah, we'll get into that, because I don't know how much strong arm tactics and how far you want to take that, because that can get just as ugly. And then you get into the world of beware of fighting monsters, lest the monster you become, you know, because you allow the fear and hate to turn you into what you hate, and you don't want to do that. So how do you go? Anyways, that's it.
Yep.